I'd like to turn things right over to our guest speakers for this week. Rabbi Gilah Caine, who is the rabbi at Temple Beth Ora in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Not everyone in Canada is in Ontario. We Torontonians need a reminder of that. As well as Tamar Dinner, who will be teaching together with her. So before I turn it over to them, if you'll join me in the blessing for study. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu v'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed is the Eternal, whose mitzvot, whose commandments bring holiness to our lives, and who commands us to engage in, to immerse ourselves in words of Torah. And I'll turn it right over to Rabbi Caine and to Tamar. Take it away.
Thank you very much. Toda Rabbah for the invitation, Rabbi Streifer, and to everybody who's here. It's lovely. So we will begin with a poem, and I'll share the screen so we can all see the poem. And you will also have a link to this source sheet in your in the chat, and you're welcome to look at it. And then we'll introduce ourselves. Okay, make public. Yes. Okay, so many questions from Safaria here. Beseder.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm Tamar. I'm going to read this poem to start off our Beit Midrash, and this poem is called Fire. What makes a fire burn is space between the logs, a breathing space, too much of a good thing, too many logs, packed in too tight, can douse the flames, almost as surely as a pail of water would. So building fires requires attention to the space in between, as much as to the wood when we are able to build open spaces in the same way we have learned to pile on the logs. Then we can come to see how it is fuel, an absence of the fuel, together that make fire possible. We only need to lay a log lightly from time to time. A fire grows simply because the space is there, with openings in which the flame that knows just how it wants to burn can find its way.
Yofi, toda rabba, Tamar. Thank you very much. And I'll expand the text soon. So thank you. We're going to take this idea of space and fire and what allows things to grow together into this joint conversation that Tamar and I are going to have, hopefully. We're actually inviting you into a conversation we had as Tamar prepared a tallit for herself at this time. We will introduce ourselves, and I will also say that the conversation we're having is an ongoing conversation especially since October 7, but also prior to that, since Tamar and I are not exactly in the same space in relation to our relationship with Israel and our relationship to Jews in the diaspora and our responsibility towards Israel. And of course, October 7 brought many of these things much more to the forefront of the conversation. And we've been navigating this conversation, I think, in the congregation in general. And then we found ourselves kind of touching on this again as Tamar was preparing her tallit. So this is the conversation we had. So Tamar, would you like to introduce yourself maybe, and then I'll introduce myself, and then we'll go into it.
Sounds great. So it's so lovely to see you all. I am a little bit nervous for some reason, so just putting that out there. This is my first time joining this Beit Midrash. So my name's Tamar Dinner. I was born in South Africa and moved to Amaskwichiwaskahigan, which is the Cree name for what we now know as Edmonton in Canada. And I've been here since I was 5, living on this land. My profession is as a social worker, and I work as a therapist with young people. I'll just say that for now, and then explain a bit more about my relationship to my Judaism in a little bit.
Yofi, toda Tamar, and I'll say that my name is Gilah. I'm a mother for two children, a teenager and a pre-teenager, and I was born in Yerushalayim. We moved to Canada almost 7 years ago now for my job here at Temple Beth Ora as a rabbi at the shul. I was ordained at the HUC in Yerushalayim. So a lot of my relationship is with the land, with the people, and of course my family is there. Yeah, and then we found ourselves in this conversation of what to put on Tamar's tallit, as Tamar was preparing a tallit for her niece's bat mitzvah that happened a few weeks ago. Tamar, do you want me to share the screen already, or do you want to first bring some of your questions up?
Yeah, so maybe I'll share a little bit about my process. And so, yeah, I'll kind of go back in time to when I was little. I went to Talmud Torah, I went to Jewish school. My parents had lived in Israel and my brothers were born there. Even as a small child, I was very critical and had many questions. I was always questioning. And so, of course, learning about Judaism and learning about religion, I had many questions and not many people who maybe wanted to answer the questions I had. As I grew older, I actually didn't have a bat mitzvah, and my parents kind of gave me, and instead of having a bat mitzvah, I went to Israel. And I think this is kind of an interesting part of my connection to the way that I've struggled with my Judaism because of its connection to Israel, which felt like it conflicted with a lot of my values that I had. And so instead of finding a way to reconcile that, I actually pushed Judaism away in a lot of ways. I didn't find a way where I belonged in it or where it felt like it resonated with me because of its connection to a state that I didn't feel like it aligned with my values. And in the last couple of years, my family, my older brother started going to Temple Beth Ora and meeting Rabbi Gilah. And 3 years ago, when my dad died, Rabbi Gilah officiated his funeral. And that is when I feel like a lot of my reconciliation with Judaism began. And a lot of that had to do with my relationship with Rabbi Gilah and meeting a rabbi who could answer a lot of my questions of what it meant to be in relationship to Judaism and to the divine. And in this process of building this relationship, my niece was having a bat mitzvah at Temple Beth Ora. And I was asked to read from the Torah at her bat mitzvah, which I had never done before because I didn't have a bat mitzvah. And it just felt very aligned in a way that was almost confusing. Like all of a sudden, I want to read from the Torah. Who am I? And who would my dad think I was 3 years later after his death? But it felt so aligned. And so along with my niece having her bat mitzvah, I also had my bat mitzvah. But of course, because I hadn't had a bat mitzvah, I didn't have a tallit. I had never gotten a tallit or had one. And so this began the process of what would my tallit be? And so when I came to Rabbi Gilah with my idea that I wanted to make a tallit, I had 3 main words or ideas, and that was liberation, justice, and I didn't know it at the time, but loving kindness as well. And it felt like, although I think Rabbi Gilah knew where I was kind of coming from with these words, that maybe what those words meant to each of us about the future of the land of Israel and Palestine, that she honored that part of me, and that connected me to Judaism. And one of the first conversations we had was around how much grief I had been feeling since October 7th, and that I wanted to honor that. And she said to me, "Don't wear your grief, wear your hope." And that resonated with me so much, in that both of us didn't want my tallit to be something where I was wearing my grief on me, but I was wearing my hope for the world that we want. And I think that although Rabbi Gilah and I have different ideas, we both have a shared idea of the world that we want in many ways. And so It was a very beautiful discussion of scripture and ideas that led to the outcome of what it says on my tallit. So maybe you can talk about this a bit, Rabbi Gilah.
Okay, no, thank you, Tamar. And I think one thing we understood while we were talking, and we talked about it at the end, was the actual act, and you'll see Tamar sewing her tallit and making her tallit, but the act of creating something very tangible together, putting yarn together, making the tzitzit, tying the tzitzit, was in a way at this moment where we talked about how much of the Jewish community seems to be tearing apart. Actually, we were creating an act of tying with all of our differences, right? When you take different strands of a tzitzit and you loop them together and you tie them. So taking these differences and actually looping them together, tying them together, strengthening our knot, even though we have different strings holding, each of us is holding a slightly different string. So on the back of Tamar's tallit, there is one verse, and then on each of the corners, there's a word. And I think when we started talking about justice and liberation, this is the first verse you came up with. Tzedek tzedek tirdof. tzedek tzedek tirdof למען תחיה. וירשת את הארץ, אשר אדוני אלוהיך נותן לך. So justice you shall pursue, that you may thrive and occupy the land that God Adonai is giving you. And we talked a bit about this verse, and the words justice is important in our actions as Jews. And you know what, Rabbi Streifer, if people are asking questions, and I see Tamar, if people are asking questions, I can't actually also see the chat, so just kind of let me know if things are coming up. Thank you. We were talking about this verse about justice you shall pursue, and even though justice is so central and is important, I questioned the act of this one-mindedness of running after one word, running after justice, trying to capture this one thing, which seemed almost like we're on a hunt for something. And what sort of energy are we bringing into a tallit if we're bringing this act of almost hunting for an ideal, acting for an idea? It felt a bit, to me at least, and Tamar, you can add your thoughts, but it felt to me a bit as if there was something violent about the tirdof, okay? The tirdof, the pursuing. And I suggested we look at some verses where there where there was a bit more softness in the act of pursuing justice, pursuing kindness. So is Tamar here, or did she fall out of she's here? Okay.
I am here. I'm just having trouble with the sound. Is anyone else? Or is that just me? Okay, we're good.
Yeah,
Perfect.
okay. So then we looked at a few more verses, different ones. And then we found this one. Do you want to read the psalm here? Oh, do you want to read no, we don't want it to go there. I'm going to stop sharing. Olam chesed yibaneh. Sorry, I'm just going to bring it back.
Sorry, I'm going to try go out and come back one more time because my sound is acting up. I'll be right back.
So I'll read the verse. I'll put it back on the screen and I'll read the verse. I'm sorry for all of that. Okay. Olam chesed yibaneh. We looked at this one. The translation here is, I declare your steadfast love is confirmed forever. There in the heavens, you establish your faithfulness. The Hebrew is Olam chesed yibaneh. Ki amarti olam chesed yibaneh, shamayim emunatcha bahem. There's also a beautiful tune to this. Rabbi Streifer, you probably know it, and maybe other people know the song for Olam chesed yibaneh. We looked at this idea of chesed as loving kindness. And one understanding or one translation of this verse is the world will be built through loving kindness. And as we were talking about it, and this image of creating something together, not running after it in order to arrive at justice and goodness even, but a building together out of loving kindness, especially something that you wrap around you, felt like a a different conversation we could have between us as people who might not agree on all the politics, but at least are agreeing on working together and building together. And I just want to add one more thing relating to this act of creating a tallit together as a way of talking about things that are difficult to talk about. Sometimes we have too many words. We use too many words. Okay, we're very textual as a group, as a people. I see Bob smiling there. We're very textual as a people. We enjoy words. We go into words. Sometimes words are not enough. Sometimes words hide. Sometimes words separate us. And even though we were talking about words and touching words and trying to figure out words, the actual act of tying the strands of the tallit together, the act of creating together, even in silence, was an act of healing, an act of closeness, closeness beyond words. That kind of the poem that we read at the beginning of the space between words that allows fire to happen. Okay, the silence that we sometimes need as communities, perhaps, as we're trying to build something, as we're trying to make a fire grow, we sometimes need silence, not more wood and more words. And moving to an act of doing art together, of creating a garment together, in a way allowed that at this point, in this specific moment. And then we knew we wanted the Olam Chesed Yibaneh. Tamar realized she wanted the Olam Chesed Yibaneh, which we added to the tallit, these 3 words. And we added the word tzedek on the 4th corner. So around surrounding Tamar are the Olam Chesed Yibaneh and the tzedek. And then on the back, we found this verse for Tamar. Ken, do you want to? Shalom.
So
you're here.
Hello. For some reason, I don't know what's happening with my sound. It's coming in and out. But I had something I really wanted to express in my my tallit was this idea of collective liberation and the way that we all have to work together towards the world that we're building, the world of loving kindness and justice. And so Rabbi Gilah and I were talking about this idea of liberation and the collective and also kind of activism. And so she told me about this quote from Pirkei Avot, which is really interesting because that's the book of fathers. And there is a lot of ways where, although my dad had many skepticisms about religion, in so many ways, this whole process was about honoring my ancestors. And so I thought it was interesting that it was from that book. And this is about, so he says, or Rabbi Tarfon said, it is not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you at liberty to neglect it. And I think at a time of so much urgency of what do we need to do and things need to change in order for people to be safe, in order for people to feel like they can have life. It can feel like there's so much responsibility on each individual person. I know for myself to create change, but that's not something that we can do alone. And that can feel very defeating. It can feel very hopeless. But this passage really reminded me about that our work is not as individuals. Our work is in the collective. And that although it can feel like we can't really do anything alone or that it's so hopeless, when we work together and we don't give up on that work, hopefully we can build that world that we're wanting.
So Tamar, maybe I'll stop sharing and you can share your video to show people what you actually created in the end.
Okay, perfect. So I work in an art form called printmaking. There's lots of many ways that people create prints. And I used 2 styles, silk screen and lino cut. And so I'll show a video of a little bit of the process of making my tallit, and putting the words on it and putting images on it that felt important to me. Oh, I think Rabbi Micah, you need to make me because I came back in, a host again. There we go.
You should be able to share now. There you go.
Perfect. Can everyone see? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, so some of it is stills and some of it is video, but you can see this is me with my linen that I chose as my tallit. And so this is the beginning of the process of sewing my tallit. And so I had wonderful friends who helped me make my tallit. The first person was my friend Bev, who is a seamstress and a fashion designer, and she helped me to sew my tallit. And you'll see a picture of kind of the process of my tallit with my holes ready for my tzitzit to go into. This is me mixing paint with my friend Maddie. And this is a process called silk screening. So we burned the words that I wanted in my tallit onto a screen. And then you use ink to push through ink onto the fabric underneath the silk screen. And so you'll be able to see the process in a video. This is olam, as we talked about, and chesed, that is on the corners of the tallit. And this is me silk screening the words across my tallit, which I'll show you after. And this is a lino cut. So that's a piece of linoleum that I carved an olive tree onto. And so you can see on the back of my tallit is that olive tree. And that's me and my niece and my sister-in-law who all had a bat mitzvah on February 17th with our tallits. So thanks everybody for watching that. And you can see my tallit here. And then I met with Rabbi Gilah to learn about tzitzit. And there's many different ways that you can tie tzitzit. The way that I chose was to write the words because each Hebrew letter correlates to a number. And so a way that you can tie tzitzit is to tie the knots to make the words. So many people have, I think Rabbi Gilah taught me that people have Adonai that they write into so that they're surrounded by God with their tallit. I chose to write out the words that I have on my each corner. So this I tied in knots chesed. So I knotted the course. What do you call it, Rabbi Gilah?
The gematria, yeah, the gematria.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Geometry.
Gematria.
Not geometry,
It's from the same word as geometry in Greece.
Oh,
in
same
Greek.
word. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So me and Rabbi Gilah tied our tzitzit together, or she taught me how to tie it, and she taught me about kind of the ritual that when you're tying tzitzit, you're either thinking about the tzitzit or it's kind of a meditation. So you're not kind of chatting about outside worldly events. So that really helped us in that kind of idea of the first poem that we read about the space in between, and that we were working together and healing together and learning together and sharing so much, but it didn't necessarily have to be in words. And then I'll talk a little bit about the choice to do the olive tree, which has many meanings actually, and more meaning that has come to me since the bat mitzvah, because a really profound moment to me in the bat mitzvah was the passing down of the Torah from generation to generation until my niece was holding it. It was extremely emotional to think about that rite of passage, especially at this time where I actually have never felt as connected to my ancestors as I have in this time. And I was telling Rabbi Gilah how almost strange it feels that since October 7th, it feels like I should be having more of a crisis of faith than I ever had in my life. because I have so many questions about the Jewish soul and what it means for us, for many things happening that I don't think represent our people to be happening. And so that has been confusing for me, but it hasn't had me question my faith. And Rabbi Gilah asked me the other day, is it a crisis of faith with the divine? And it feels very strange to say that it's not. And to say that my connection with the divine has never actually felt stronger. And so the tree, Rabbi Gilah talked about at the bat mitzvah how the Torah is the tree of life and that it is a living thing. The Torah isn't a stagnant object. It's actually a living thing, and we are part of its life, our ancestors and ourselves. And so having a tree on my tallit is very meaningful to me. The tree that I have, the olive tree, is also really about, because it's a living thing, like connecting with all those that I believe are my kin. And for myself, I do believe that Palestinians are my kin. And so being in solidarity with them and representing that on my tallit made it possible for me to wear my tallit. And Rabbi Gilah had asked, or kind of posed this thing to me in our process, in that our process together was about what would make it possible for me to wear my tallit. So kind of what would make it feel like I could wear my tallit and honor myself and my integrity and my ancestors and my relationship to Judaism all at the same time. And this is a very big question, especially for someone who has struggled with my relationship to Judaism. And so, yeah, I feel extremely honored to wear it. And I feel like I can wear it. And I feel like that is extremely hopeful to me in what it means to be in a covenant with so many other people who are maybe have different ideas around what's happening, but are navigating very difficult things and questioning, which I think is a very huge aspect of being Jewish.
Tamar, thank you. And yeah, just to kind of two things to close, and then if people have questions. The first thing is just a final thought for myself, and the second will be a piece of prayer. So Tamar, it was actually an honor and a pleasure working on this with you, especially since we come from different places. And I felt like the space of the tallit was like an altar, like a sacred space, a sacred joint space we were able to create together to bring in these different thoughts. And maybe we need to do more doing and less talking in our congregations, right? More creating together and less, talking about squabbling over texts, because we were able to create that sacred space and bring in different images, even like the tree that holds different meanings to different people, but it's the same image that you were able to bring in. And that was just wonderful and very hopeful for me, because it allowed me to see that there are places where we can bring this sanctity back into our presence. And I'll just end with a piece of tefillah from Rabbi Waskow. It's just a tiny piece from a much larger tefillah that he wrote, a rewriting of the Shema Yisrael for our time. And it's about sounds and the movement of air. He doesn't write Adonai, he writes the movement of air, but he calls us Israel, he calls us God wrestlers. And I really felt this was what we were doing as we were working together. So Shema Yisrael, like the silence, listen, right? It's the listening, it's the quieting down for a moment. Hush and listen, you God wrestlers. Pause from your wrestling and hush to hear. This is the breath. I always find it weird to say it on Zoom, so I'm not going to do it. but to hear the breath of life. Here in the stillness, the still silent voice, the silent breathing that intertwines life. And that's Adonai, and that's us. So thank you everyone for listening and for being here with us. And for actually Rabbi Streifer for inviting us to talk and for allowing us to think back on what we created together. If people have questions, and if we have time, then I'm happy to try and answer. Or
So let
Tamar
me
can
say
answer.
a huge thank you to Tamar and to Rabbi Caine for this. Really, I love how you brought text in, but in terms of doing and making. Two quick things, and then I'm happy if people want to stick around for a couple of questions. We mentioned Pirkei Avot, and we do have a Pirkei Avot study group starting in 2 weeks. So for anyone who might be interested in that, I'm going to put the information into the chat. Feel free to either ask me or to sign up there. And then secondly, just that next week, we're going to continue the discussion talking about trees. I'll be teaching the Tikvah through text, and we're going to talk about tree planting, texts about tree planting as an act of hope. So it a little bit related to some of what Tamar was talking about today. So we're officially out of time right now, but if any folks would like to stick around and ask a question for a minute or two, you could certainly do that. Thank you, everyone. Any questions at this time? I saw one question in the chat. Sarah asked, is it a crisis of faith with political institutions that seem to represent our faith? Tamar, I think that was for you. Oh, I think maybe she can't hear me.
Tamar, can you hear us?
Yeah, it's a bit fuzzy, but I can a little bit.
Do you see the question in the chat from Sarah? And it seems like it's to you. Yeah.
That's such a great question, Sarah. And that is very similar to what Rabbi Gilah asked me. Is it a crisis with the divine or political institutions? Because she asked, is it a crisis with the faith or with the divine or with the people? And I do feel like it is much more a crisis with the people, or a crisis with how do I belong within these spaces, because every institution, at least where I live in a pretty small Jewish community, every Jewish institution is connected to Israel. And so, I think that can pose a moral conflict for people who are struggling with kind of supporting a nation state. Like I struggle with that, with even supporting Canada and the things that Canada has done. And so this does kind of pose a crisis with how do we separate our faith and our but we also need a minyan, like we also need community. What's the rabbi's name, or the person, Gilah, who just went off on his own you were telling me about?
A person who went off on his own.
The person that you were studying the other day.
Oh, okay. Now my mind is blank. Sorry. I'll try. If you continue talking, I'll try and remember what I'm studying.
Yeah.
Oh, Tamar,
you're muted
now.
You're muted.
We don't just pray on our own as Jews, we pray with others. And so I do think that, this is a time that poses a challenging question to many people, and also can push people away. And so I thought it was so hopeful that me and Rabbi Gilah could work together. And although, like she talked about, have those differences, like as a spiritual leader, she doesn't want to push me away from this. And I think that is really special and beautiful.
Well, thank you both. Appreciate your time and your creativity. And this was a very special Tikvah through text, because we looked at text a little bit differently. So again, everyone, thank you for being here. I want to say thanks again to Rabbi Gilah and to Tamar for your very moving presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. It means so much to share with you all.
Yeah, for me as well. Thank you. Tada.
Thank you.
Thank you.